Crossfire Legion blends Starcraft-style RTS skirmishes with a sort of deck-building mini-game. You unlock new units for your faction by playing matches against other players or bots. It's designed to get players engaged with the competitive multiplayer element of Crossfire, but there are some disappointments due to the in-game shop. Whereas StarCraft III factions vary wildly in appearance and playstyle, Crossfire Legions are all slightly futuristic and generic that deploy a random assortment of tanks, technicals, helicopters, and drones onto the battlefield. The gameplay of Crossfire Legion is very much what is expected from a Command and Conquer-inspired game. The number of units available to train is limited by mission in the campaign, and by a card-style deck in multiplayer. Typically, players will only have a couple of units worth training on each mission, and there is also an extremely limited number of building types, which streamlines gameplay, but makes it a little lackluster. The campaign is short but enjoyable, with a difficulty that is forgiving regardless of the difficulty level. Crossfire Legion is a competent but generic Command and Conquer style game for real-time strategy fans. Iron Harvest is a mech real-time strategy game with strong similarities to Company of Heroes. Command mechs in the World War I era in this spectacular and dramatic RTS. It takes place in an alternate 1920s and uses its settings from a board game and has some steampunk flair. Its story revolves around three factions that emerged from Iron Harvest's version of World War I, namely Saxony, Rusvia, and Polania. Iron Harvest delivers one of the best RTS campaigns since StarCraft II and is varied, great staged with full of funny large mechs. However, Iron Harvest's campaign is so good not only because of its missions, but also because of its story and staging. Unfortunately, apart from the mech design, the three factions hardly differ from each other. Polania's mechs and infantrymen, for example, are generally a bit cheaper but take fewer hits, while the opposite is true for the Saxon mechs. In addition to multiplayer, you can compete against the AI in two ways under the menu item Missions. In combat, you compete against the same maps and team constellations as in multiplayer, but with AI players on for adjustable difficulty levels. Iron Harvest is an old-school RTS similar to Company of Heroes with maybe a hint of Dawn of War. Company of Heroes 3 is supposed to offer the largest base game of the series. Thus, this time there will be two campaigns that cover a playtime of more than 40 hours. The battlefields are again divided into zones, which will provide fuel, ammunition, and combat power. The game is centered around conquering and defending these zones with different resources in order to be victorious. As with its predecessors, Company of Heroes 3 is rarely for harakiri strategists. Instead, we work our way forward, position by position. In the process, we also have to accept setbacks from time to time, when the conquest of a control point just barely succeeds, but the surviving troops are not enough to withstand the counterattack. In addition to the two campaigns, Company of Heroes 3 of course again offers free skirmish games and multiplayer modes. With the British, the US Americans, the German Wehrmacht and the German Afrika Korps, for factions are playable in these modes for the first time. Each of them has its own technology trees and mechanics. In both single-player and multiplayer modes, the factions are reinforced by troops from Canada, Australia, India, and Italy. You can compete against each other on up to 14 multiplayer maps in modes ranging from 1v1 to 4v4. Furthermore, there is a co-op mode where you can enjoy this real-time strategy game with a friend. Dune Spice Wars is a real-time strategy game with 4x elements. There are 4 distinct factions that all engage a little differently with interesting combat, politics, and exploration make for an exciting time on the beautifully deadly world of Arrakis. With the brutish Harkonnens relying on strong military garrisons to squeeze additional productivity out of their workforce, or the Freemen's advantageous ability to collect precious spice without noisy, mechanical harvesters that tend to attract trouble of the giant deathworm variety. Spice Wars always keeps you hungering for something, which can lead to conflict even with a long-time ally if they just happen to get to that juicy spice field you were eyeing before you can. Combat is relatively simple but satisfying. Until you get pretty deep into the military tech tree, your army size will be limited to only a handful, which makes microing your units crucial in an even fight. The espionage system is where the complexity might have finally boiled over. Using spies, who are named characters who generate an intel resource, you can execute useful operations that range from hindering enemy replenishment in a region to starting a rebellion in their settlements. There are some balancing issues with the victory conditions and espionage mechanics, but it is a clever, generally well-balanced RTS with strong faction diversity. Age of Darkness Final Stand shows a lot of promise as a survival RTS where you choose from several characters, who serve as your skirmish hero, and you enter the world, expand in it, and attempt to survive. The game features a day and night cycle that strongly influences the overall mechanics. You need to try and clear away the darkness by building structures to keep the area lit, and this is of central importance because if you do not, then the creatures that go bump in the night will respawn where you've left some darkness. Constant expansion is also very necessary. Age of Darkness somewhat simplifies one aspect often found in RTS games: worker management. You control where the buildings go, and you control the military. The rest is managed by the systems you implement around you. As you push through the world, you lay down new structures while managing your base. At the beginning of your first skirmish, you have no idea that you're constantly on the clock. Every few nights, there's a special event in which you get rushed by a vast number of enemies. They swarm at your structures and must be fought off. This game is a challenging one, and you must learn the best way to optimize your defenses and your expansion. Age of Empires 4 is a historical real-time strategy game set in the medieval era. It strips away some of the complexities of its predecessor, returning to that lovely exploration economy conquest loop while adding mostly welcome touches of its own. One characteristic of this game are the asymmetrical factions, which will almost certainly elicit screams of bloody imbalance but nonetheless count as the game's greatest success. The campaigns follow the Normans, Mongols, Rus and English across 3 distinct eras each. Interposed throughout each campaign are crisp documentary-like videos showing footage of significant castles, towns, landscapes and battlefields as they are today. This game might not have the balanced e-sport appeal of Age of Empires 2, but it is fun to experiment with the different civs and learn their unique ways. Upon starting a new game, returning players will immediately settle into the rhythm of resource gathering, villager spamming, scouting and outrageous forward settling. For a religious victory, you can no longer take relics back to the safety of your base, but instead have to hold onto all the sacred sites on a map for 10 minutes. Unfortunately, for every thoughtful tweak and feature there's an equal and opposite misstep holding Age of Empires 4 back from greatness. Warhammer 40k Dawn of War 2 is one of the best tactical RTS games within the Warhammer universe with badass space marines. It brings to the classic real-time strategy genre some role-playing elements, whereby the squads you control in each of the campaign carry over mission to mission, grow, and evolve according to what gear you decide to equip and what skills you decide to improve. Dawn of War 2 have been expanded the cover system, imported destructible environments from Company of Heroes, and brought the capture point mechanic for resource acquisition to it. The game is divided into a campaign mode and skirmish mode for multiplayer. In the campaign, Relic gives you the option to play cooperatively, with those participating working together to vanquish the enemy, though it's only the host who reaps the persistent rewards. With multiple difficulty levels and the ability to effectively grind optional missions for better gear before entering into the final battle, the campaign offers quite a bit of gameplay hours. While the overall formula could still use some fine-tuning, the current product is 1 part hypercharged tactical combat, 1 part streamlined competitive RTS, and entirely worth playing. Starship Troopers Terran Command has the recipe of a strong RTS with some unique, asymmetrical and positioning-focused warfare. There are just a handful of hitches that keep it from being really great. A campaign that takes too long to become challenging, some frustratingly bad pathfinding and targeting AI, and the lack of multiplayer or a scenario editor are the main setbacks. Terran Command is all about maximizing lines of fire to the enemy, since the mobile infantry generally outrange and outgun the bugs. But the chittering hordes, in turn, have a major advantage in mobility, numbers, and melee combat. Most squads can't fire through friendlies and can either have a clear shot, dealing full damage, a partial line of fire, which reduces damage, or be completely blocked. Terran Command is the best Starship Troopers licensed game to date. But the highlight of the atmosphere is the background music. Although it never comes close to the massive film soundtrack, it has a completely different strength. Depending on the situation, the musical accompaniment is dynamically adapted to the gameplay. If you like the movie and have wanted a game that finally implements the license properly, then just have fun with this real-time strategy game. Northgard looks like a Viking-themed Age of Empires, but is much more like a Viking RTS with nasty weather. The basics are still familiar. You start with nothing but a ramshackle town hall and some villagers, eventually growing it into a large, defensible settlement that can handle raids from monsters and other Vikings. That's done by finding resources and exploiting them using specialist workers and buildings. The map is made up out of discrete regions containing resources, treasure, and enemies, but only space for a few buildings, and they've got to be colonized before they can be used. Every region costs exponentially more food to colonize, so you really need to plan out your expansion in advance, considering the impact on your stockpiles. Winter is a challenge that can be overcome by worker placement and preparation, the two most important things in Northgard. While each clan shares a lot of the same features, they're still a distinct bunch. The Wolf clan, for instance, are a leery mob of fighters. This means they don't need as many farmers, fishermen, or hunters and can afford to invest in larger warbands. Northgard lives in the skirmish mode and is a surprising elegant real-time strategy game with a great variety and complexity. Starcraft II is a RTS trilogy and consists of Wings of Liberty, Heart of the Swarm and Legacy of the Void, and was developed specifically for esports. Co-op missions are a hugely pleasant surprise, thanks to demanding mission design and unique heroes who provide their own twist on the three races. Customization is a big part of the campaign's appeal, but really the best part is the mission design. Sometimes it's a giant wave of fire slowly sweeping across a map, spurring you to frequently relocate your base in pursuit of objectives. Sometimes you'll just be in control of a single unit and need to stealth into enemy territory, relying on AI-controlled allies to help wipe out detectors so you can snipe, slice and nuke your enemies into submission. Once you're actually into the multiplayer, there's plenty to do. The progression online eases you into competitive play, by giving you the option to practice on rush-proof maps before dropping you into placement play. The big boom may be behind Starcraft II, but it will remain an integral part of the professional esports scene. In addition to the ladder system integrated into the game, tournaments are regularly held worldwide. Starcraft II is, after 10 years, still an enjoyable and fun real-time strategy game and really polished with a lot of content.